33 billion tons, remember that number. This is the minimum mass of an object that is currently hurtling through our solar system. This figure is not speculation. It is a cold calculation, published in a scientific paper under the direction of the Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb. And this number terrifies scientists to their core because it is impossible. It violates everything we knew about how the universe is structured. To give you some perspective, this is the mass of a small moon compressed into an object no more than 5 kilometers in diameter, a density approaching that of neutron star matter. But this is not a star. It is a block of ice, covered in frost and dust. And that's not even the worst part. The worst part is why we know about this mass. We know about it because this object is behaving like an enormous cannon firing without any recoil. Data from the Swift Space Telescope showed that 3I divided by Atlas is ejecting 40 kilograms of water into the void every second. 40 kilograms. And this is happening in the freezing cold, 3.5 times farther from the sun than Earth, where water ice should not be actively evaporating. This powerful jet of gas should have, by all the laws of Newton, pushed the object, altering its trajectory. But it does not change. 4,022 precise observations from 227 observatories around the world have shown 3I divided by Atlas moves with flawless precision, ignoring the force of its own reactive jets. As if these jets are merely an illusion, or as if the object's mass is so colossal that this expulsion is like a breath of wind against a supertanker. This paradox, this physical impossibility, led Avi Loeb to give the object a preliminary rating of 6 out of 10 on the scale of alien technology. 60% certainty that we are not looking at a natural phenomenon. We are looking at a mechanism. And with each passing day, the evidence for this only grows stronger. Thank you for being with us. Please subscribe, leave comments, and share the video. But the lack of recoil is only the first chapter in this cosmic drama. When astronomers at the European Southern Observatory in Chile aimed their spectrographs at the object, they encountered a second impossibility. In the glowing clouds surrounding 3I divided by Atlas, they discovered clear traces of nickel. This in itself is strange, as nickel is a refractory metal, but the real shock was what they did not find. The spectrum was almost completely devoid of iron. In nature, nickel and iron are cosmic twins. They are born together in the agony of supernovae and travel the galaxy in an inseparable bond. Found in meteorites, they are always present together in predictable proportions. To find one without the other on a natural object is like finding smoke without fire in a forest. It does not happen in nature. But it happens constantly in industry, here on Earth, during the creation of high-purity alloys used in the aerospace sector, where iron is an undesirable impurity. The signature of 3I divided by Atlas is that of industrial manufacturing, not cosmic debris. Moreover, the nickel emission was not constant. In just 1 month of observations, from July to August, it grew 25-fold, not smoothly, but in a leap, exponentially. As if someone were slowly turning a power dial, systematically increasing the heat, or activating some internal process. Scientists, in their paper published on the RCiv preprint server, called this extremely puzzling. They suggested that the nickel might be released due to the decay of a parent molecule, for example, nickel tetracarbonyl. The problem is, this compound is a synthetic that we use on Earth to purify metal. How it ended up on a comet that has traveled for billions of years is a question for which science has no answer. To this chemical mystery, a visual one was added. During the same months, amateur astronomers, taking advantage of the unique darkness during a total lunar eclipse, photographed the object and saw that it had suddenly turned bright green. This eerie emerald hue is usually caused by diatomic carbon molecules, but spectroscopy conducted earlier had shown that these molecules are virtually absent in 3 ATI divided by Atlas. Once again, the same paradox. The effect is there, but the cause is missing, as if we are observing an illusion created by laws unknown to us. Avi Loeb's version connects this color to cyanide, the emissions of which also sharply increased. Cyanide, nickel without iron, anomalous water. Every new detail did not clarify, but only thickened the mystery. The object was not behaving like a passive piece of ice, but like a complex, multi-component mechanism whose systems begin to switch on one after another as it approaches its power source, the Sunday. But even these anomalies pale before the main mystery, the trajectory. The path of 3 I divided by Atlas through our system is a masterpiece of the impossible. Its orbit lies almost perfectly in the plane of the ecliptic, the same plane where all the planets revolve. For an interstellar wanderer arriving from a random direction, the probability of such a coincidence is 1 in 500. But that's not all. The arrival time is calculated with surgical precision to ensure a close approach with 3 key planets at once: Venus, Mars, and Jupiter. The astrophysicist James Chen from MIT, who participated in the calculations, compared it to throwing a dart from New York that hits a bullseye in London and then ricochets to hit targets in Paris and Rome. The combined probability of such an event, according to the calculations of a team of 20 scientists who dared to publish this data, is 0.005%. One chance in 20,000. This is not just luck. This is navigation. This is a route that NASA engineers spent decades calculating for our Voyager probes. Only 3 I divided by Atlas executes it with an ease that suggests it's just a casual stroll through a familiar park. On October 3rd, the close approach with Mars took place. 6 orbiters, including the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter with its ultra-powerful high-rise camera capable of discerning objects the size of a table on Mars, were aimed at a single point. For the first time in history, humanity had the opportunity to view an interstellar guest up close with its best instruments. And what did we get? Nothing. Absolute, deafening silence. NASA, which usually publishes images in near real time, remained silent, citing the government shutdown, which, by a strange coincidence, began just 48 hours before the flyby. The European Space Agency published only blurry images, stating that analysis would take months. China and the United Arab Emirates, whose satellites were also in position, showed nothing at all. This silence, this coordinated quiet from 4 competing space powers, became yet another anomaly. Perhaps the most disturbing of all. It gave rise to a question that echoed louder than anything in the silence. What exactly did they see on October 3rd? What was in those images that the world, in their opinion, was not supposed to see? The information, however, leaked. And it leaked from the most unexpected of sources. From the depths of the Internet. From an anonymous forum where someone, claiming to be an insider at the European Space Agency, spoke of the failure of a working group that could not explain the object's behavior. He claimed that 3I divided by Atlas was not a comet, but a macroscopic quantum object, a so-called cue ball, a relic of the Big Bang with its own internal power source. This hypothesis, strangely enough, explains everything: the immense mass, the lack of recoil from the gas expulsion, the strange chemistry, and the thermal imbalance. According to the anonymous source, the cue ball heats its icy mantle from within, causing a perfectly symmetrical, isotropic expulsion of gas in all directions. In this case, the recoil forces mutually cancel each other out. There is no push, no acceleration. There is only a constantly evaporating shell around an incredibly massive and ancient core. This also explains the constant brightness. A symmetrical cloud does not flicker as it rotates, and the exotic chemistry, a product of a quantum object's decay, not natural sublimation. And the thermal paradox: the object doesn't need the sun's energy, it has its own. But even this insane, at first glance, theory is not the most alarming part of the story. The most alarming thing awaits us. On October 29th, 3I divided by Atlas will reach Perihelion, its closest point to the Sunday, and at that moment, it will disappear behind it, hidden from all our telescopes for 2 months. Avi Loeb directly calls this a strategic blind spot, the perfect moment to perform a maneuver without being seen. He has calculated that it is precisely at perihelion that the object could execute a reverse Oberth maneuver using the sun's gravity to break and transition from an escape trajectory to a permanent orbit. It could stay forever, and we will not see it happen. We will only find out in December, when it reappears in our field of view, if it appears where we expect it to, and if not, if its trajectory changes, that will be irrefutable proof of the use of engines, proof of technology, and Avi Loeb has even calculated the arrival window. If small probes were to detach from the main object, they could reach optimal positions relative to Earth in the period between November 21st and December 5th. This mothership theory has transformed an astronomical observation into a global thriller. The nervous tension is exacerbated by historical parallels. Let's recall the ancient Sumerian texts. They described the sky gods, the Anunnaki, arriving from a star in the constellation Sagittarius, the very direction from which 3I divided by Atlas came. They described their home planet Nibiru, returning every 3,600 years, roughly the same amount of time, according to calculations, that 3I divided by Atlas has been traveling. The texts say that the Anunnaki left Earth but promised to return, leaving a way station on Mars. They described terraforming technologies capable of turning dead worlds into living ecosystems, technologies requiring enormous amounts of carbon dioxide. And now, look at 3I divided by Atlas. Its composition, dominated by CO2, is the exact mixture needed to trigger a greenhouse effect on Mars. Release this payload into the Martian atmosphere, and in just a few months, the planet will begin to come alive. The temperature will rise. The polar ice caps will begin to melt. This is not just a hypothesis. This is cosmic engineering. And perhaps this is not the first delivery. Orbital images of Mars show strange chemical deposits that have appeared in recent decades. What if Oumuamua and Comet Borisov were not random visitors, but preparatory probes that delivered the initial components? What if our solar system has been under observation and gradual modification for decades, and we are only now beginning to notice it? The timing is not accidental. Humanity has reached a point where we can potentially interfere. We have rovers on Mars, satellites in orbit. If an advanced civilization wanted to complete its Mars terraforming project without our interference, they would need to act now before our presence on Mars becomes permanent. This also explains the sudden race to colonize Mars that we have been observing in recent years. Perhaps intuitively or based on classified information, world governments understand that the window of opportunity is closing. But while scientists waged a war of ideas in academic journals and on social media, the object itself, indifferent to our disputes, continued on its path. A path that was about to enter its most critical and most secret phase. On October 29th, as predicted, 3I divided by Atlas slipped behind the Sunday. For the first time since its discovery, every telescope on Earth went. The object entered a zone of perfect concealment, a cosmic blind spot, at the very moment of its maximum power and maximum vulnerability. Perihelion. The closest point to the Sunday, the moment of truth, which we will not be able to see. Let's imagine two scenarios for what is happening right now in this drama hidden from us. The first scenario, a reassuring one. 3I divided by Atlas is just a comet. Strange, anomalous, but natural. In this case, perihelion for it is a trial by fire. Gigawatts of solar energy are bombarding its icy surface. Ancient ices, dormant for billions of years in the interstellar cold, are exploding into gas. The coma is expanding to unimaginable sizes. The tail is stretching for millions of kilometers. Perhaps the nucleus cannot withstand the thermal stress and is breaking apart. In December, either a dazzlingly bright but predictable comet or a swarm of its fragments will emerge from behind the Sunday. In any case, the mystery will be solved in favor of nature. All anomalies will be attributed to exotic chemistry and geology. Scientists will write hundreds of papers, and humanity will breathe a sigh of relief. But there is a second scenario. The scenario that makes Avi Loeb and his supporters talk about consequences capable of crashing financial markets. In this scenario, 3I divided by Atlas is technology, and perihelion for it is not a test, but an opportunity, the optimal moment for a maneuver. Hidden from our eyes, it can engage its engines, whatever they may be, and perform a reverse Oberth maneuver. It can slow down just enough for the sun's gravity to capture it. It can switch from an escape trajectory to an elliptical orbit. It could stay. Or, as Loeb suggests, it could deploy gadgets. Release a fleet of small invisible probes that, using a gravitational maneuver, will disperse throughout the solar system toward their targets. We do not know which of these scenarios is playing out right now behind the blinding disk of our star. We can only wait. The beginning of December will be a moment of truth for humanity. Astronomers around the world have already booked time on the most powerful telescopes. Amateurs are preparing their equipment. Everyone is waiting for the appearance of a light that will either confirm our laws of physics or change them forever. What exactly will they be looking for? First, and most importantly, the trajectory. Astronomers will take new positional data and compare it to the orbit calculated before perihelion. Any deviation, however slight, that cannot be explained by natural outgassing will be a signal. A signal that something requiring an engine happened behind the Sunday. This will be the moment when the technology hypothesis ceases to be a hypothesis. Second, its appearance. Will it emerge intact? Or will it have broken into pieces, as a comet should? Will its brightness match the heating models, or will it remain unchanged, confirming the theory of an internal power source. Will its anomalous chemical composition persist? Will it still be breathing water and emitting nickel where it should be frozen? Third, its activity. As it moves away from the Sun, any normal comet begins to freeze and quiet down. If 3I divided by Atlas continues its anomalous activity at a great distance, it will be another powerful argument in favor of the cue ball theory, or another internal engine. And finally, radio signals. The radio telescopes that have been so mysteriously silent will now be listening with doubled attention. If the object begins transmitting after perihelion, it will be irrefutable proof. The 3I divided by Atlas event has become a mirror for humanity. It has reflected our greatest hopes and deepest fears. It has shown our technological might. We can detect an object the size of a city arriving from another star system. And at the same time, it has shown our cosmic immaturity. We cannot catch it. We cannot study it up close. We can only passively observe from a great distance. It has revealed our passionate desire for answers and our fear of what those answers might be. The universe has thrown down a challenge. It has sent us an object that does not fit into any of our boxes. We can try to force it into the category of a strange comet, ignoring the contradictions, or we can admit that we have encountered something that is beyond our experience. Let's imagine that in December, the second scenario plays out. Astronomers around the world are peering at their screens. The first images appear, but something is wrong. The object is not quite where it should be. The deviation is tiny, on the verge of being a measurement error, but it's there. A frantic verification begins. Data from all observatories flows into a single center. Computers recalculate the orbit again and again, and the conclusion becomes undeniable. It maneuvered. It slowed down. It stayed. At that moment, the world will change forever. This will not just be a scientific discovery. It will be the greatest event in human history. The news will spread with the speed of light. First, through classified channels between observatories and governments. Then, as a leak. And after that, as an official, carefully weighed statement. Imagine the headlines. Imagine the president's speech. Imagine the feeling when every one of the 8 billion people on Earth looks up at the sky, knowing that up there, in the darkness, there are now they. The initial shock will be replaced by an avalanche of questions. Who are they? Where are they from? What are their intentions? Humanity will act immediately. The SETI project, which for decades has been listening to the cosmic noise, will be repurposed for a single objective: to send a message to 3I divided by Atlas. But what will we say? Who will speak for all of Earth? The UN will convene an emergency session. World leaders will argue about the content of the message. Scientists will insist on transmitting mathematical and physical constants. Philosophers on a message of peace and humanism. The military on a demonstration of force. Humanity's first word to another civilization will likely be written by a committee and be devoid of all soul. And we will send it using our most powerful radio transmitters, aiming a beam of energy at an object that perhaps communicates via gravitational waves or something we cannot even imagine. And the response, most likely, will be silence, not because they didn't hear us, but because for a civilization capable of crossing interstellar space, our radio is at the level of smoke signals. Their silence will be the most powerful message. It will mean they are not here for a dialogue. They are here for observation or for work. We will become inhabitants of a cosmic zoo, or worse, natives on an island where explorers from another continent, possessing incomprehensible technology, have landed. Every step we take, every action, every rocket launch will be monitored. We will live under a constant, invisible gaze. This will change everything. Geopolitics will lose its meaning. What are border disputes when a power capable of destroying a planet hangs over you? Religions will face the greatest crisis of faith. Science will get a new, singular stimulus to understand their technology. A frantic race will begin to decipher their signals, to analyze their emissions, to create our own technologies that could at least come close to their level. Perhaps they will share knowledge. Perhaps we will gain access to zero-point energy, to faster-than-light travel, to immortality. And perhaps they will simply ignore us, as we ignore an anthill on the way to a construction site. Their project, the terraforming of Mars, will continue. We will watch through our telescopes as the atmosphere of the red planet thickens, as the first seas appear on its surface, as a new biosphere is born. We will witness the creation of a world, and it will be the greatest and most humiliating spectacle in our history, because we will understand that the same thing perhaps once happened on Earth. Or the first scenario will play out in December. Astronomers will find 3I divided by Atlas exactly where it should be. Its trajectory will be a perfect hyperbola. It will be dimmer, perhaps fragmented into several parts, but its behavior will be completely explainable by natural processes. All anomalies will find their explanation. Nickel without iron will turn out to be the result of a complex but natural chemical process. The trajectory statistics, a rare but possible coincidence. The silence of the agency's bureaucracy. The world will breathe a sigh of relief. Avi Loeb will admit he was wrong, but will emphasize the importance of testing bold hypotheses. Life will return to its usual course. But something will change forever. We have peeked over the edge. We have, for a moment, imagined a universe that is far more complex and populated than we thought. And this experience will leave a mark. It will spur on our searches. It will make us build more powerful telescopes, send more daring missions. It will make us look more closely at every new interstellar guest. Because even if 3I divided by Atlas turns out to be just a comet, it has taught us the most important thing. The universe is full of surprises, and the biggest one, perhaps, is still ahead of us. The data will arrive soon. The universe rarely gives such clear deadlines for discovery. In a few short weeks, we may know whether the statistical anomalies were just cosmic chance or the signature of a plan. We will know if we witnessed the flyby of a strange rock or the arrival of a new player on our stage. And then humanity will have to decide what to do when it realizes that the silence between the stars is not empty, but simply very quiet. The universe keeps its secrets, but it does not keep them forever. Sometimes it reveals them. And to those who are brave enough to look without flinching, it can show something unimaginable. The story of 3I divided by Atlas is not yet over. We are standing on the threshold of the final chapter. And what is written on its pages may determine not only the future of astronomy, but the future of all humanity. And while the world holds its breath for December, waiting for the verdict on 3I divided by Atlas, in the shadow of this grand drama, another, quieter, but no less unsettling act is unfolding. It seems our solar system has suddenly become a very busy intersection, and not all travelers are following the rules of the road. While all our attention is fixed on the interstellar guest, we almost missed another. The comet designated C divided by 2025 R2 Swan. Unlike 3 I divided by Atlas, this is our local object, likely from the Oort cloud, an icy sphere at the edges of our system. But its story is a clear lesson in how easily we can miss something. Comet Swan was discovered very late, at the end of September 2025. And it wasn't a powerful ground-based telescope that found it, but an amateur astronomer, Vladimir Badarev, analyzing data from the Swan instrument aboard the Soho Space Observatory. This instrument observes the Sun in the ultraviolet range, tracking hydrogen emissions. Comets, by evaporating water, create a huge hydrogen cloud around themselves, invisible in normal light but bright in ultraviolet. And Badarev noticed this cloud. The problem was that the comet was invisible to ground-based telescopes because it was hiding in the Sun's glare. It had passed its perihelion, its closest point to the Sun, back on September 12th, and only after emerging from behind the solar disk did it become available for observation. We noticed it when it was already moving away from the Sun, but heading straight for Earth's vicinity. On October 20th, Comet Swan will pass at its minimum distance from our planet. Not at a safe 269 million kilometers, as will be the case with 3 I divided by Atlas. It will fly by at a distance of only 39 million kilometers. On a cosmic scale, that's practically next door. And now, for the most alarming detail. The minimum orbit intersection distance, or MOID, between Comet Swan and Earth is only 7 million kilometers. This is the geometric point where our paths in space come closest. If Earth and the comet were at this point at the same time, the consequences would be catastrophic. This time, we will miss each other. But the fact that an object with such a potentially dangerous close approach was discovered so late underscores a fundamental vulnerability in our planetary defense system. What if its orbit had been slightly different? What if it had been discovered even later? Moreover, Comet Swan has shown itself to be a very active and unpredictable object. In late September, observers recorded a sudden outburst when its brightness sharply increased. Such outbursts often indicate the fragmentation of the nucleus, the comet breaking into pieces under the heat of the sunday. Each such piece becomes an independent projectile, flying on its own, slightly different trajectory. We don't know if Comet Swan broke up. From this distance, we only see a common coma. But if it did, then instead of one object, a whole swarm of debris is now moving along the orbit, and this swarm, stretching out over time, turns into a meteor stream. A stream that Earth's orbit might one day cross. The story of Comet Swan is the story of a ghost that slipped past our sentinels, but it was not the only one. On October 1st, 2025, almost simultaneously with these events, something the size of a small car flew past at an altitude of only 419 kilometers over Antarctica. Closer than the orbit of the International Space Station, the asteroid, designated 2025 TF, was moving at nearly 13,000 miles per hour. We didn't see it. Astronomers from the Catalina Sky Survey discovered it only 6.5 hours after it had already passed Earth. We saw its receding trail in our rearview mirror. Had it been slightly larger, had its trajectory been a few hundred kilometers lower, it would have exploded in the atmosphere with the force of several kilotons. Not the end of the world, but enough to cause panic and destruction if it had happened over a city. And we would not have had a second's warning. These events are not just separate cosmic incidents. They form an alarming picture. While all our attention, all our resources, all the media headlines are fixed on one large, slow, and essentially safe object, 3I divided by Atlas, the real threats small, fast, and undetected, are slipping through our net. Is 3I divided by Atlas, with all its exoticism and anomalies, the perfect distraction? Not in the sense that someone sent it for this purpose, but in the sense that it has so captured our imagination that we have stopped paying attention to the more mundane, but also more real, dangers that are always present in space. Or, if we return to the bolder theories, what if this is part of the plan? To create information noise, to overload our tracking systems and perceptual channels with one grand event, in order to carry out other, less noticeable operations under its cover. While we are guessing, 3I divided by Atlas itself continues its journey behind the Sunday in November. The ESA spacecraft, JUICE, on its way to Jupiter, will try to get a look at it. This will be our only eye in that part of space. But, as the agency has already announced, we will not receive the data from it until February 2026 due to communication difficulties. 4 more months of waiting. 4 months during which the object will be doing what it does in complete secrecy. And in December, the time will come for ground-based telescopes. And then we will finally start to get answers. But whatever answers we get, the lesson of the past few weeks is clear. Space is a much busier and more dangerous place than we are used to thinking. And the most dangerous threats are not the ones shouted about in the news, but the ones we don't even suspect. But while the public was distracted by the parade of comets and asteroids behind the closed doors of government buildings and military bunkers, a completely different story was unfolding. The coordinated silence of the space agencies was not just a bureaucratic delay, it was a cover for an unprecedented mobilization of the planet's intelligence and analytical resources. According to documents later leaked from a source in the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, a secret meeting took place in Geneva during the first week of October. It was attended not by politicians or diplomats. It was attended by the heads of the space agencies NASA, ESA, Roscosmos, and the CNSA, as well as the leaders of their military space intelligence divisions. For the first time in history, sworn geopolitical rivals sat at the same table to discuss a common problem so serious that it pushed all earthly conflicts into the background. The subject of discussion was the very images that were never published, the images from the HiRISE camera. According to the leak, the images showed not just a comet's nucleus. They showed an object with a distinct geometric structure. Not a perfect cylinder or disk, as was speculated online, but something more complex, an asymmetrical, multifaceted object with a surface that seemed not icy, but rather composite, with areas of varying reflectivity. But the most shocking thing was not that. A series of images, taken a few minutes apart, showed the object changing its configuration, slightly but noticeably. Parts of its surface seemed to shift, changing the overall shape. It didn't look like a gas outburst. It looked like mechanical movement, as if a ship were changing the position of its panels or shields. This was irrefutable proof of technology. Faced with this data, the participants of the Geneva meeting found themselves in an unsolvable dilemma. Publishing these images would lead to global panic and chaos. Hiding them would lead to accusations of the greatest conspiracy in history. A compromise, temporary solution was made: to remain silent. Everyone to remain silent. To give scientists time for analysis and governments time to develop a strategy. ESA was instructed to release its most harmless, low-quality images to create an illusion of transparency and quell the wave of public interest. The calculation was that a blurry white dot would disappoint the public and switch their attention to something else. The plan partially worked. But it did not account for one thing: the persistence of people like Avi Loeb and the power of decentralized analysis by thousands of enthusiasts around the world. A secret war began. The world's intelligence agencies directed all their resources at 3A, divided by Atlas. Satellite tracking networks, designed to monitor ballistic missiles, were reconfigured to search for any objects that might separate from the main body. Radio telescopes, part of electronic intelligence systems like the American Echelon, began round-the-clock listening of the object, trying to decipher the complex signals it began to transmit after the collision with the coronal mass ejection. China, according to rumors, engaged its giant 500-meter fast telescope, the most sensitive in the world, in an attempt not just to listen, but possibly to respond. The geopolitical game had changed. Supremacy in space now meant not the number of satellites or rockets, but who could first understand the technology and intentions of 3I divided by Atlas. The stakes were immeasurably high. If the object's technology could be replicated, it would give any nation an absolute advantage. If its intentions were hostile, then survival depended on who would be the first to understand this. Within the scientific community, the schism turned into a civil war. Scientists working on government contracts received tacit instructions not to comment on the anomalies and to stick to the official version of an unusual comet. Those who, like the 20 authors of the sensational paper, dared to speak publicly about the possibility of an artificial origin faced pressure. Funding for their projects was suddenly frozen. Their applications for telescope access were rejected for formal reasons. Their reputations were attacked in the academic press. One European astrophysicist, whose name is not disclosed, anonymously told a journalist, "They are forcing us to be silent. Anyone who doubts the comet risks their career. This is not science. This is enforcement of a dogma. We are looking at the greatest discovery in history, and we are being ordered to pretend that we see nothing." But information continued to leak. Through anonymous posts, through encrypted messages, through hints in public lectures, an even stranger picture began to emerge. Analysis of radio signals intercepted by the military showed that they were not just data transmissions, but something like a dialogue. 3I divided by Atlas, it seemed, was communicating with something else. Something already within our solar system. Let us recall the reports of the remote viewers about underground bases and structures on the moon. Could it be true? Could 3I divided by Atlas have arrived not as a scout, but as a coordinator to activate or instruct an already existing network? This theory would explain the incredible precision of its trajectory. It didn't need to conduct reconnaissance. It was flying along an already laid route to already known coordinates. It was flying home. This changed everything. We were no longer just an object of observation. We were the territory upon which a foreign operation was unfolding. An operation that has perhaps been going on for thousands of years. And we, with all our wars, politics, and technology, were merely background noise. Ants scurrying on a path where giants walk. This thought was so monstrous that even the bravest minds were afraid to say it out loud. But the numbers, the images, and the signals continued to arrive, and each new piece of data made this thought more and more likely. While governments and militaries tried to assess the strategic threat, a small group of theoretical physicists faced a much deeper question. What kind of physics even makes the existence of 3I divided by Atlas possible? The answers they began to find in the most daring corners of theoretical science were even more alarming than any military threat. Let's return to the cue ball hypothesis, first mentioned in that very 4chan leak. This is not just a made-up term. It is a real, though hypothetical, object predicted by some theories of elementary particle physics. Imagine the universe in the first moments after the Big Bang. It was a boiling cauldron of energy, where the fundamental forces we know today were unified. As the universe expanded and cooled, it went through phase transitions, similar to how steam condenses into water, and water freezes into ice. But sometimes such transitions are not perfect. Defects can remain bubbles or knots of space where the state of the early universe has been preserved. A cue ball is one such possible defect. It is a stable, non-topological soliton. In simpler terms, it is a clump of energy that does not decay because it is held together by its own field. It is a fossil of the Big Bang. If 3I divided by Atlas is a cue ball, shrouded in a mantle of ordinary matter accumulated over billions of years, then all its oddities fall into place. Its internal decay is its engine, explaining the activity far from the sunday. Its incredible mass is a natural property of such an object. Its isotropic, symmetrical emission of energy from the inside out causes the icy shell to evaporate uniformly in all directions, which explains both the lack of recoil and the perfectly steady brightness without any flickering. The exotic chemistry, like nickel without iron, is no longer the chemistry of a comet, but the decay products of a fundamental field. This theory transforms 3I divided by Atlas from a simple technological artifact into something much more ancient and fundamental. Not just a ship built by a civilization, but the very fabric of a different physical reality, having flown into ours by chance or by design. But if the object is a clump of primordial physics, then where did the humanoid figures that the remote viewers saw come from? Here the theory takes its most frightening turn. What if the cue ball is not just an engine, but a computer? A quantum computer of unimaginable power. Its internal field may be capable not only of generating energy, but also of processing information, perhaps even supporting consciousness. The humanoid figures with antennas could be not physical beings, but avatars, projections, an interface that this consciousness uses to interact with our world. And the consciousness wormholes and attacks on chakras, this is not mysticism, but a description of technology. A technology capable of directly interacting with the bioelectric fields of living beings. A hacker attack on the human nervous system at a quantum level. This idea erases the line between physics and consciousness, suggesting that consciousness can exist in forms we cannot even imagine, not in biological bodies, but in stable configurations of energy fields. And this brings us to the greatest paradox of all, the gravitational one. How does an object with a mass of 33 billion tons exert no noticeable gravitational influence on the instruments around it? The orbital probes of Mars should have felt its pull, however weak, but reports on their trajectories show no anomalies. Here, we enter the realm of the boldest science fiction, which, however, has a theoretical basis. What if this object is capable of controlling gravity? What if it can mask its own mass, creating a local curvature of space-time around itself that isolates it from the rest of the universe? This would be absolute stealth and absolute power. The ability to become gravitationally invisible, or conversely, to project powerful gravitational fields at will. This is a technology that would allow for moving planets, creating or destroying stars. It is a level of control over reality that we would call divine. While humanity panicked and argued, the object continued to act. There was no hostility or friendliness in its behavior. There was only the cold, methodical purposefulness of a machine executing its program. A program that perhaps was written into it even before the birth of stars. It was approaching the sun not as a threat, but as a source of energy, or perhaps as a tool necessary for the next step. It was not behaving like a guest, but like a master returning to his workshop. And our entire civilization, with all its achievements and anxieties, was merely dust on its path. Dust that it would either brush aside or use for its own purposes. And so, here we are. In October of 2025, in the quiet before the storm, we have traced the path of this guest from another star system, analyzed its impossible chemistry, calculated its incredible mass, and witnessed its frightening interaction with our Sunday. We have delved into the archives of secret government programs and ancient myths, and at every turn, we have found disturbing coincidences. Each anomaly, taken separately, could be a random occurrence. But together, they form a picture that to ignore is to voluntarily close our eyes to the most important event in human history. The silence of the official agencies, which began after the close approach to Mars, was never truly broken. The blurry photograph from the European Space Agency only raised more questions than it answered. And the precious images from the high-rise camera, which could have shown us the true face of 3I divided by Atlas, remain hidden in NASA's archives. This silence itself has become the main evidence. In an era of instantaneous information sharing, when every new image of Mars or a distant galaxy immediately becomes public domain, the concealment of data on the most intriguing object ever recorded in our solar system speaks volumes. It says that what was seen does not fit into a comfortable and safe worldview. Right now, the object is in its most mysterious phase in the blind spot behind the Sunday. Far from our eyes, it is undergoing the trial by fire of Perihelion. If it is a comet, it may not survive this encounter, breaking apart under the force of colossal temperatures and gravity. If it is technology, this is its chance. A chance to maneuver, to engage its engines, to change its destiny, while no one is watching. In early December, the great vigil will begin. Astronomers around the world, professionals and amateurs, will point their telescopes to a predetermined point in the pre-dawn sky. They will wait, waiting for the appearance of a faint flicker of light that will either return our familiar universe to us or change it forever. The verdict will be based on several points. Trajectory. The slightest deviation from the path that cannot be attributed to natural processes will become almost irrefutable proof of intelligent control. Appearance. Will it emerge intact, or will we see a swarm of debris? And activity. Will it continue its anomalous breathing in the cold depths of space as it moves away from the sun, which would definitively confirm the presence of an internal power source. Whatever the truth may be, we have already changed. 3I, divided by Atlas, has forced us, as a species, to grow up. It has forced competing nations to cooperate in the face of a cosmic mystery. It has forced scientists to step beyond familiar dogmas and consider the boldest hypotheses. It has shown us that our system of planetary defense is vulnerable, and our understanding of the universe is incomplete. It has turned millions of ordinary people into explorers, gazing into the night sky with a new feeling, a mixture of awe and anxiety. We are standing on the shore of a cosmic ocean, and the wake from a passing ship has already reached us. Was it just a random iceberg of a strange shape, carried to us by currents from another galaxy? Or was it a reconnaissance ship that silently passed by, mapping our world and leaving us to guess at its intentions? Or perhaps it was a construction module arriving to work on a neighboring site, reminding us that we live in a world that possibly does not belong to us. We do not know. But the very emergence of these questions changes everything. In the coming months, we will receive more data. We will analyze the trajectory after perihelion. We will get images from the JUICE spacecraft. We will continue to listen to the radio waves. The mystery of 3I divided by Atlas will continue to unfold. But perhaps there will never be complete clarity. Perhaps this is the nature of contact with a mind so ancient and alien that its actions will forever remain on the edge of our comprehension. Perhaps the greatest lesson that 3I divided by Atlas will teach us is that the universe is not obliged to be understandable to us. It simply is, in all its frightening and magnificent diversity. The telescopes are waiting. The silence of space is about to be broken, and humanity, for the first time in its history, is listening with its full attention.